All right, about as close to being perfect as possible without actually being perfect.
That's a great way to introduce me. Thank you very much for that.
And Rick is also with us.
Oh, no, I thought I was as close to perfect as you can get without being perfect.
It's one of the few times I just introduced myself now. Just the way I came in with the intro, just a personal little challenge every week.
If you say so.
We can get to some interesting, cool stuff. More people will be joining us. Maybe, maybe not. Actually, there was a scramble today, but we got a lot of things to talk about. Some more important than others, interesting than others. I did attend a meeting today in which some people from the CRA were there, including Andrew Brisboe, and answered some basic questions and some stuff that's coming up with the public meeting. Talked to some others about it and got into a conversation about the tincture change, the definition change, and some things that's happening now that may not have been intended, but that may not have been intended, but that some people are kind of upset about. Especially if Jake comes on, he can help to describe some of that. Jake Greba may join us from Midnight Roots. Also, he's doing some great stuff with the product line, and he's got a big fat ass huge joint coming out called the Owl. And sounds great. I'm definitely going to try a couple of those. That's for sure.
You gonna run those sponsors, Jay?
And we'll do the sponsors now. That's what I was getting to eventually. Here we go.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe, of course, is sponsored by Stone Depot, who has exceptional cannabis. Redemption, also exceptional cannabis. Real Leaf Solutions, yeah. Detroit Nutrient Company, exceptional as well. Grow Green MI, they're cool. Custom 420 promos, and along with that, Culture Clothing.
Perfect.
A lot of exceptional cannabis people on there.
And Bernie 420 promotion is probably going to come on the next couple of weeks or so and hang out with us. Nice to have them on. Danielle from Stone Depot will probably come on also a little bit. Good conversations with both of them, and we'll do our thing.
Different perspectives. Bernie's an interesting guy with the ancillary industries, and of course, Danielle's an industry vet for a while, and she'll have something to say about some potential changes at the MRA, I am sure.
Yeah, and here's Bruce Leach, of course, well-known cannabis attorney, works all over the state, but the Flint area traditionally. Hey, fellas, thanks for keeping us updated. Much love. That's very cool. Thank you, Bruce. J Bud. Oh, I tried the Owl with Jake the other day. It was amazing. Then again, all of Jake's products are amazing. I guess while I'm thinking about it, I believe Jake 1 year at the Big Cup, the High Times Cup, won first place in like 3 different categories or something like that. Pretty impressive, and I think like maybe edible flower concentrate, something like very impressive like that. Cares about the people who care.
Well, Jake's been around for a long time. Jay too. And thanks, Penny from Northern Specialty Health. Yay!
Hey, we have a few people here, and of the few, it's they're all quality
viewers.
Yeah, as opposed to our normal viewers, of course. Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to make that distinction.
I think you did,
but particularly like this group here because they're here.
No, we've got some great folks that pay attention to our show on a regular basis. And it's a weird week, a lot of stuff going on. As Jamie and I were talking pre-show about all the events that happened last weekend, and then all the events coming up this next weekend too.
Yeah, so like it was this last weekend had a lot of great stuff going on. And I'm sure next week does. We had Jeff on the show for the Dead Funk. I can't think of the name of it. I'll look it up. But there's the event next week that they came on and talked about. Mm-hmm. There's lots of stuff going on next weekend too, but you're right. So there was an event in Muskegon. There was, I forgot what it was called. I know you posted Saturday, and there was Hoxeyville. There was the Blues Brothers. There was Cannapalooza, which I saw Razor Ray up there, and Deborah, who we haven't seen emerge for a long time, was up there and showed up in the posts on Facebook and stuff like that. So. Anyway, I'm not sure if I can even think of all of them, but I think there's some really good reports that came back from the Blues Brothers. The Bellers were facilitating the cannabis tent at Hoxeyville, which is a traditional, regular, commercial, kind of jam concert event, which I know that
first year they've allowed cannabis there. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that Michael Phile's very familiar with the Hoxeyville scene, and the Blues Brothers event was a state licensed cannabis event. I think Flow Productions kind of put it on, but a lot of people kind of contributed in one way or another.
That was a huge success according to everybody. Too,
yeah, Jay
I
says
Blues Brothers haven't heard a bad word about Blues Brothers at all.
Yeah, and I thought we were going to hear from Mike closer to 5. So very cool that you're here joining us, man. Hopefully that means now you all your other affairs are set aside and you're ready to commit now for the whole show with us. I'm not sure if he's even picking up that I'm addressing him now. The answer.
You were trying to guilt him like a mom guilts the kid, but,
Instead, he probably did hear me and he just split. He's like,
Becky says, "How much fun?" I'm assuming Becky, that's the Blues Brothers event.
Blues Brothers, yeah, and I'm sure she was there helping out in Sons and Daughters and Glenn, etc. And I know that Josie was there and they had a blast. Greenstem was there. The now vertically oriented cannabis or vertically integrated cannabis company from west side of the state. We got to hang out with them.
Oriented, you'd be into.
I don't know what I'm thinking,
right? Yeah, vertically oriented.
We got to talk to them a little bit more, get the backstory a little bit from George and how he basically this is out of retirement kind of work, and I decided to go for it and take the jump. It was interesting, and they've been proving themselves to be a very philosophically sound, kind of conscientious company, and they're doing well even in the midst of these tough times right now. So, and they were at this one, the Blues Brothers, and at the Dead Funk thing next week. Dead meaning Grateful Dead based work with some really great artists from a lot of well-known bands coming together to do this special project. I'd like to go. I will not be able to make it, but I would like to go to that one for sure. But yeah, so what else we got? I mean, there's what other happened? There were some issues at one of the events. I know most of them went pretty smoothly. Hoxeyville went smooth. Blues Brothers went smooth. Cannapalooza went well, from what I can tell. I actually did speak to Razor Ray, and that's what he had to say.
Well, Cannapalooza is always fun. You could have 50 people or 500 people there, and everybody's going to have a good time. John Schlicker always makes sure. Becky says she worked, but she also won VIP tickets. So we got our picture taken with them being Dan Belushi and Jim. I'm sorry, Jim Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. All right. I was trying to put the two of them together. Imagine what that baby would look like.
Like this right here, Michael Phile.
Oh, you think so? Yeah. You came in at the right time there, Mike. Oh no. But, yeah. So
I was expecting a little bit. As you were slipping off the show the first time, I was telling people that based on our exchange, I thought you were coming on later on in the show. So I'm glad that you pushed all of your affairs aside so you could come on now and then dedicate yourself to the next 2 hours with us.
You guys will always take a priority in my life.
All right.
Yep. Thank you. That's a nice little sound cut that we'll take for promotional purposes later. Yeah.
Did you go to Hoxeyville or any of the many events?
I was not at Hoxeyville this weekend. I was at Detroit Psychedelic Conference.
That sounds like a very fun event also, too.
Honestly, it's the first Hoxeyville I've missed in several years, and it's another event I would have missed it for. But the Detroit Psychedelic Conference is family, and I love anytime I can connect with all the Detroit peeps. So very glad that happened this weekend.
Hoxeyville is a legendary event, which has a loyal following. Cannabis or no cannabis, that was going to be a successful event. I think Saturnalia and the Blues Brothers being physically closer to each other, it being on the west and the southwest side, I think one may have cannibalized from the other. I think part of the reason that we're seeing some of the complaints about Saturnalia is a low attendance. And when things don't go as well as you expect, sometimes promoters don't honor their agreements.
It's a tough balance. I've done many events, but my one experience with a state license event and working with Camorn and his crew, who really did all the work, but being able to kind of watch the process, it's not just like any other event. And if ultimately you include in your formula for success relying on X amount of ticket sales, and they and they don't materialize,
It's a bad
you're
way.
stuck not being able to pay people and stuff like that, I guess. I mean, I'm just making huge assumptions right now, but
Of course, we
you know.
we don't really know what the situation is there. Neither of us, and apparently Mike wasn't there either, too. So all of us are just relying on third-hand info, and that's just a bad way to talk about something. So
yeah, so whatever it is, it's good that most of the events went really well.
my
And,
crotch.
So I haven't heard anything yet from Hoxieville, but I've been running their sustainability program for years and heavily involved with them. I didn't know there was potential. I knew they had the license for the weekend, but I didn't know, what happened with that or what the layout was.
that went really well. The
Seems like 2 thumbs up, Mike. Yeah.
Tom and Krista Beller from Real Leaf Solutions, I guess, were instrumental in facilitating that and operating it, and they reported that everything went really smooth there.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I'll probably talk to Jake, who runs the festival, soon here. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
Well, we reported earlier this year that Arts Beats and Eats was considering doing a cannabis section at their huge, gigantic, probably one of the largest in the state festival in Royal Oak, but they decided to wait a year to see how things like Hoxieville, for example, and Canajam Fest, which was in Muskegon a couple of weeks ago, how those turned out. Specifically Hoxieville, because they're looking to combine a place where they sell alcohol and where they sell cannabis too, to see if there are any concerns regarding that. I can't imagine that there would be. I mean, to be honest with you, we did that at High Times Cannabis Cup up at Auto City Speedway for years. 5 years they did it, and probably 8 events during those 5 years, and was never an issue.
Yeah, I don't foresee there being an issue with the cross of the two. I mean, if there was going to be an issue, the issue would have been with alcohol by itself, because, I'm not one to throw one drug under the bus over another and say, this drug's good, this drug's bad. But, I mean, historically speaking, the problem arises with alcohol, as it is far more riskier than even many of our illegal substances.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, entheogenic substances are only legal for use in a certain number of places in the state of Michigan, but that's a far safer alternative than an alcohol blaster, right? But by the same token, I understand where Arts Beats and Eats is. This is all new. You have a big insurance policy. This is one of the largest festivals in the state, where they draw hundreds of thousands of people over a period of time. I think it's like a 3-day. So when you have something that large, it's best not to be too innovative. You want to make sure that you're working on something that's kind of sound science and proven technique. And I think they just needed to see it done once. I imagine probably 2023 Arts Beats and Eats will allow that medicating and potential sales area at that big festival too.
So that actually raises a big question for me. Movement is another one of those really large festivals. Almost 200,000 show up in Hart Plaza for a weekend. And that was sponsored by like Jars Cannabis and Ooze. And there was definitely weed being given away and alcohol for sale. I don't know if there was weed for sale, because, I have plenty of my own. I don't need to go to a dispensary to get it. But, I hadn't thought about it with movement at the time, but there was both alcohol and cannabis vendors there.
Yeah, Sean Owens reminds us to puff or drink, or don't drink, but don't combine the two unless you're very experienced. I've never really had a problem combining alcohol and cannabis together, but I know other people that have said
I
that.
used to, man. I
really
used to get sick, kind of. I was drunk first, and then smoked some, cannabis. I would get very dizzy and nauseous, from that. Of course, if I was really drunk, I didn't really have the ability to turn anything down. I would just smoke it anyway, and just live through it. But I used to try to anyway. I haven't had a drink in years. Just to try to smoke first whenever possible, if I could ever actually pull it off back then. But
yeah. So
some
the
people,
fact
some people deal with it quite well, though. You're right.
But you can see where they would want to maybe watch a test case or
well,
two.
You can't on a real or a regular like licensed event also have cannabis, or I mean like unless the tent is separate, is that part of the actual? Okay, so if the tent is separate and only those who enter in there. Okay.
Well, and you'd have a different identification system too, because ideally in a cannabis consumption tent, you would allow medical patients, if they had proper cartage, to enter into that area, and even if they were under 21. Whereas in an alcohol place, you would not allow anyone under 21.
You know that the ability to do that is only afforded by way of the MRTMA. I wonder if that 18 to 20-year-old medical patient is necessarily valid in that.
That's a good point, Jamie. You're right. Because those events are a creation exclusively of the adult use system, not the medical system. So medical rules wouldn't apply.
And to the question of, is the mixing of these two substances an issue at the event? I would almost think they'd want a wristband separately anyways, even though it's 21 and up for recreational and cannabis or alcohol, because, a green one and a purple one or whatever, just so you can see who's using both, who's using one, and, because you're going to have problems when you have a few 100,000 people, no matter what. To directly correlate that to, this was an event that had both of these things, and just draw that conclusion without having, two wristbands to say this person was consuming both things. I don't think you can actually draw a correlation, can you?
It's tough. I would think you'd have to actually survey ambulance operators and runs, the medical personnel there, to see from their perspective exactly who needed it. Because let's face it, somebody that gets woozy, that's not noteworthy. That happens all the time. People get woozy because they get too much sun or they drink too much water. If you need medical services provided by an ambulance, then that's noteworthy. So I'd be curious to see what the ratio was. I will say that I've interviewed ambulance guys at our cannabis events previously, and their comment is always, easy money. They don't have to do anything at a cannabis event. They're required to be there, but they don't do any runs. Bob Young's watching with us. Thanks, Bob. But of course, at an alcohol fueled event, then it's much, much tougher. They had a big expose on the Faster Horses event, which is a huge country music festival that takes place in Michigan at an auto speedway, and sexual assaults, rapes, domestic violence, other assaults, commonplace at Faster Horses.
So I'm not sure if you're referring to the same article. MLive did an article about that. We're talking about all the sexual assault and the levels of alcohol poisoning and everything that were going down at the festival. And they compared it to another festival of similar size at the same grounds, Electric Forest, where there is a large amount of alcohol and drug consumption, but the focus is far more drugs than alcohol. And the number of, sexual assaults was much lower at an event where several illicit substances were being used. And again, the number of medical emergencies was down, even though Electric Forest always has people with some ODs and some big medical issues due to drugs. So, again, I think alcohol by itself is clearly an issue. I'm not.
The insurance companies agree with you, man. So even in the early cannabis events, as long as alcohol was not there, the premium for that event was a lot better. Significant.
And the insurance cost is people that haven't run events probably aren't aware, but the insurance cost is one of the largest expenses that you can have in some instances, especially if you're not bringing in big national name arts. We've had Charlie Strackbein on previously. Charlie, of course, famous for the Monroe Street Fair. He's talked about his difficulties with insurance. Penny, of course, 100% agrees with me, not Jay, me. But the fact is, with the insurance companies, sometimes even the type of music that you play, they will drive your rates up. He was talking about if he had rap artists on, the insurance company wanted to charge him more. They wanted to look at his band selection.
Heavy metal bands, rap, they take all that. There must be some actuary somewhere that see a significant difference when these things are present or something, and they charge accordingly. I don't know.
Well, they don't need that. They don't need solid evidence. They can just do it based on their own insecurities and 1950 style fear.
So Jay Budd earlier said that, sorry for blowing up your messenger, Jamie. Wanted to send you events coming up, and I wanted to have a nice list just to tell people about next weekend, but I don't have it in anything, so I'm not sure where exactly it is. And it's 420, by the way. So Jay, resend or
yeah, and it was my phone that went off because I'm the bad guy.
Or hit send or whatever's going on, because I wouldn't mind having that list. We kind of spent some time on that, and I want to speak a little bit about some of the upcoming questions of the public CRA meeting and some of the information I kind of picked up on during a meeting today in which the CRA was involved with some other lawmakers and people. I think all vendors, if a mixed environment, need to be trained as a bud tender to look for severe intoxicating behavior regardless of substance. There's some obligation to keep an eye on that. Yeah, and a bartender, there's some obligation for that, and even if it's not alcohol, obviously alone, maybe to not serve somebody or to have some protocol for people you identify as being fucked up. Certainly not giving them more alcohol.
The MRTMA's, the admin rules refuse service for anyone that's visibly impaired at any of the retail centers, and they expect the same rules to be enforced at remote locations like at events too. So there's an in-law obligation to not serve people who are fucked up. I got to tell you though, I don't think anybody's going to. I don't think anybody would serve someone like that. Well, I've seen people stagger up to tables and get turned away. Right.
Let's say somebody is so and there could be so many variations on this. I'm not just going to assume from my experience anyway. Somebody's like only using some cannabis, but is noticeably affected, and somebody doesn't want to serve them. But that person is, had some medibles or something like that, is, face is melted, eyes droopy. I can speak for myself and a lot of people I know. That's not the time where I get excited about getting a bunch of more cannabis in me. I'm like kind of good at that moment. But when I used to drink and I was even really drunk, I still wanted to get to more alcohol quite a bit.
I have been in bars at 2:00 where waitresses tried to clear glasses from the table, and the person who wasn't done with that glass yet made threatening remarks towards this innocent waitress who's just doing her job trying to close the store. Alcohol does that to you.
Yeah. Desperate over a substance. Yeah. Dangerous substance.
And you're more likely to pull the trigger on that violence when alcohol's involved.
Yeah, I guess I want to get back into that CRA thing, but it was brought up on Medical Mondays last night too. There is this defense for a couple of those militia members that are accused of trying to be involved in the governor's kidnapping plot,
who were convicted today.
Okay. And part of it was these guys sit around, they smoke a bunch of pot, they talk a bunch of shit, shit like they smoke pot all the time. They try.
So they're not responsible for what they said.
It was a strange. I guess when your defense is limited, maybe you resort to stuff like that, man. But pretty weak. And I didn't like the inference that it's like alcohol, where you'd kind of soak your frontal lobe in alcohol and not really have inhibitions, and spout off and whatever. It's just, I think they're trying to make this comparison that it's like that, but I don't really. Maybe it works like that for some people, but to get high and then just start blabbing, or something, it's not a common experience I have just with cannabis alone anyway.
But their defense was based around blaming everybody else and taking no responsibility for the things that they were on audio absolutely saying and the things that they were caught on video absolutely doing, making and throwing bombs.
Yeah.
Using infrared cameras to study the governor's vacation mansion in order to devise a plot to kidnap her. But essentially what they said was they weren't responsible for what they did because they were misled by the FBI or because they were under the influence of cannabis. Two excuses which really blame other people and don't accept any ownership of their own actions. And I think the jury today, by the way, it took less than 2 days for the jury to come back with a verdict.
I'm
pretty amazing.
I'm not surprised to hear of improper, behavior of law enforcement. So if somebody wants to accuse the FBI of doing something, maybe even pushing somebody into a position of getting into criminal trouble when they really otherwise wouldn't have gone there themselves, it's not like I'm necessarily, surprised, but there was never any real evidence of that. That was always more just the defense then there was actually, good reason to believe that was going on. I mean, yes, there's historical bad behavior by police, but I don't think specifically they demonstrated that there was this infiltration of FBI agents or double agents or whatever, and they, tried to push this plot from within to create this. So I'm not sure. Apparently that wasn't believable. So. Good. So anyway, just wanted to throw that in because it had cannabis related, and it's also kind of twisted and weird.
Yeah.
So Daryl Barry, self-proclaimed conservative, doesn't like to get involved in controversy, says it's really great when fanatic is taken out of the population. So, well, it's kind of weird behavior to want to.
What's the alternative? Leave the fanatics within the population so they continue to destroy other people? I don't think that's a smart move.
So, and he's confirming that he is.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, all right. I understand. So I guess there's we talked about a whole lot of different things. There's a cannabis retreat or something like that up north also too. So a lot of stuff that was happening.
And today there's this Detroit summit going on with a bunch of panel discussions about various things about the industry and just education on some medical uses. And I saw the whole list last night. We talked about it on Medical Monday. So
I have to tell you, I really hope Detroit gets their shit together for a lot of reasons. The medical industry is croaking. As soon as Detroit gets their rec act together, unfortunately, it's going to be a ton of medical sales that go away. And we're really going to see how poorly medical performs in the rest of the state. I hope Detroit gets everything going soon. There's a lot of people that are depending on them being reasonable.
Yeah, well, Coleman Jr. and
Coleman Young Jr.
Yeah, Coleman Young Jr. and 2 to 3 other council members are going to be at this event today. So maybe there are people who have an understanding of the issue and will convey some important information to them. I know Coleman Young Jr. is, whether or not how informed he is completely, I'm not positive, but he has certainly been in support and been a friend of this, movement for a long time.
We were in the middle of a Lansing protest on the steps of the Capitol building, and he came out, took a break from the Senate to come out to take the microphone and address our crowd. And boy, he was enthusiastic and sincere. Sincere.
Yeah, it was never bound to go anywhere, but he introduced one of the first, somewhat reasonable legalization measures in the legislature, a few years ago. Now he's an at-large city council member, and we'll get into the cannabis issues. I mean, hopefully that history will bring back. They haven't really been that awesome with it. There's been a lot of great intentions and work on it, and really righteous considerations and things like that. But it hasn't turned out to be as functional yet as I think we'd all like to see.
Well, I'm encouraged by things like Coleman Young Jr., former state legislator, now still making good law on a local level. We're going to see Yusuf Rabi, wonderful state legislator, become a
county commissioner
for Washtenaw. And Annie Somerville still kicking around, wonderful person too. She's in local government as well.
She'll be a county commissioner also.
Yep, a ton of people out there that are in positions that you might not expect who are complete and total supporters. And I think it's a lot easier for us to get stuff done now than it was before. Anybody, I think, could see that. But because we have allies in unexpected places, and that's an important thing to note.
It's growing all the time. It doesn't happen as fast as we would like, but so
true. But Brighton's going to put cannabis dispensaries on the ballot in November, man.
That's cool. Okay, so that's what we were trying to think about, how much activity there was going to be on this one. I know there's a few states, I think, at large that we'll be looking at it, and then as far as any stuff going on and in the state, we weren't sure of all the stuff, and there might be some are we expecting any more decrim nature type local ordinance type of attempts this fall or with?
So I would expect to see Ferndale pretty soon here. I'm not sure if it'll be this fall. I kind of hope so, but maybe Lansing, East Lansing make another attempt, and Kalamazoo is a possibility as well. I know our team has been really busy down there with dealing with some of their own things, but I know our last conversations at the beginning of the summer with the council were leaning towards a full introduction. So hopefully that's still on track.
All right, so the major places still in the works. Whether or not they hit this fall for a vote is not necessarily going to be the case. But between getting an initiative up there or the council or board themselves taking action, those things are being worked on.
Yeah, I think Ferndale's the one we can almost guarantee this fall. And
it'd be this fall by way of what? By way of the council? Just
by way of Ferndale Council. I think we'll see something just like we saw at Hazel Park. Pretty quick and easy vote. Not much opposition there. It's just a matter of getting it right. I know we've already had the initial conversations and introductions of it at council, so it's just a matter of their attorneys getting the language like proper for the city and ready to go again.
Right on.
Well, that issue in Brighton, when you talk about language proper for the city, Brighton refused to put the ballot proposal on the ballot and were forced to do so by the courts. They tried to use some kind of minutia in the law to point out some micro flaw that they had in the actual petitions themselves. The court said it was an inconsequential issue and it didn't affect the intent of the voter in the signing. So they forced it on. They only needed 270 signatures. They brought about 800. So they really overkilled it. But Mike's point about making sure that the petition is proper for the community that you're putting it towards is very well put. You'd hate to have to collect signatures twice because the first time you did it, you didn't get the application right.
Well, I mean, same with our attempts at the statewide. We had to be approved by the state as to the form of it. And then, later we would have been put to any challenges as to the actual content of it. But had it gone to the ballot and been voted on, and the periods for challenge have gone by, if there's a small error in it that doesn't mess with voter intent, it is law. So that's good that the courts held that up. It's terrible to see that a community would think that something that doesn't affect the voter intent of the law could keep it from actually going in. That signals to me you need to put new leadership in the local office.
So I have a little quick story here real quick. In the 2016 MI Legalize push for statewide legalization, we had to go before the Board of State Canvassers, which includes one Norman Schenkel, who was dubbed by me as the running Republican. In order to approve our ballots, you needed to have a majority of people. There are 4 on the board, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. When our issue came before the board, it turns out one of the Republicans could not attend, and Norman realized after the meeting had already started that he was now an underdog and he could be overvoted by the Democrats on our particular petition. So he picks up his phone, fabricates some kind of a story, jumps up out of his seat and rushes out of the room. Emily, and Emily, I forget her last name. From
Lawler?
Yeah, exactly. From the Free Press or MLive, chases him down saying, "What emergency takes you away? What emergency takes you away?" And he couldn't answer. Norman Schenkel, Jamie,
he's a real estate dude or something. He's like, "Oh, I got a client," or it was just some on the cuff made up bullshit. Yeah.
Yep. So I was driving to Jackson to go to Stone Depot, Jackson this weekend, and guess what I saw? Norman Schenkel for state representative. Board of State Canvassers, the running Republican, still seeking state office. This time as a House rep. What a gutless individual. He was just such a problem for us both in 2016 and 2018.
He was thrilled to have to go in front of for this round for Decriminalize too. He just kept digging into, things that weren't necessarily the point, and like asking questions about like kilograms of fentanyl, which, we're talking about plants. I mean, yeah, there was a defelonization piece of other drugs, but he just kept talking about this. And again, you have a meeting on form where you are approved for form and, subject to challenge for form, which just means, does this make sense? Are all the pieces that are legally required there? It has nothing to do with the content of it.
Exactly.
He wanted to make it a content argument to disprove the form. And, Jeff Hank, who was obviously heavily involved with MI Legalize, represented us as well. And he just kept saying it over and over. That has nothing to do with the form of this. And, but yeah.
We went through our own version of that too with the.
I've definitely heard all the stories about him running out as well in my time with Jeff there.
Jeff was there. Jeff was there when Norman beat feet and hit the street in order to avoid being overruled in a Board of State Canvassers meeting.
Trying to avoid a defeat.
Jesus Christ, it was so funny.
So Joe's making sure that everybody knows that Democrats can be assholes too sometimes.
Yeah.
And
but the majority of our problems have been caused by Republicans, and you would be wrong to try and deny it. If you look at federally, Mitch McConnell, as the Senate Majority Leader for years and years, banned any discussion about any cannabis issue. The only reason we have any positive cannabis things coming from the federal government is because they're attached to spending riders that Mitch can't stop. Same thing here. We've consistently had problems with Republican leadership. Kevin Cotter comes to mind. Rick Jones comes to mind. The biggest haters of cannabis in the Michigan legislature, all of them, everyone is a Republican. So you can try and make parody if you wish. It's not real. It's not fact.
So
Republicans are the big problem.
There are some key Republicans that are supportive, and it's been very helpful, but the majority don't. There are some Dems who are in opposition, wrong place, wrong time, have caused some problems, but the majority of Dems have generally been sooner and faster to understand this issue and help it out. That's true. Rob says both parties stink. There are times when I get behind that concept.
That's in a general philosophical nature. However, when we're talking specifically about this particular issue, Democrats have overwhelmingly been our champions.
We have a measure. Yeah, we have a measure. And,
overwhelmingly been our champions. And it's wrong for anyone to suggest otherwise. And I'll go toe to toe. Let's do it. Let's have that debate. If anybody wishes to start naming names of Democrats who've been cannabis haters that they think were worse than Rick Jones, I'm ready to hear that name.
So, but it does encompass the spectrum of people, and the more the truth gets out about it and gets internalized, the more we don't have to worry about trying to get more and more support and get the Republicans to get on board more than they have, and
have the Democrats be more solid in their support the way that they promised to be. Yes,
and yes, and not be so establishment and all that kind of stuff. I agree. Because there's a lot of the libertarian factions, there's a lot of the progressive factions that kind of like come right together on a lot of these things.
And most independents, I think, are in the cannabis camp. I'll be honest with you. I think that's true to say.
Yeah, and this is true. We get weirdness here, and we get reached out to, but we don't get full on commitments. There's the wishy washy type stuff. We need you. And I'm kind of in there, but
and oftentimes with legislators, it's who spoke to them last, who had the most convincing argument that they heard most recently. Sometimes that's one of the reasons why corporations who can maintain a lobbyist in Lansing or in DC are very successful, because they oftentimes have that last voice in that lawmaker's ear before they go to a vote. Steenland is a good example of that.
Yeah, he supported the anti-caregiver bills, and that was unfortunate. So did Ronnie Peterson from Ypsilanti area, and he was term limited, and he hand selected somebody to take his place, and he ran for a spot on the county commission. As we said, Andy Somerville and Yusuf Rabi are going to be on the commission for sure. ran against a guy who was an incumbent, very cool dude, is in like Robbie's and Annie's camp. They're another progressive. This guy named Justin, who's very cool. I met him at Jimmy Wilson's fundraiser that Leah and I hosted. And Justin still beat him anyway. The guy has a lot of name recognition and that kind of stuff, but he also was like kind of in support of those anti-caregiver bills and that type of stuff. He's another one. He's kind of like Steenland in a way. And I'm glad that he lost. And somebody who has demonstrated themselves to be in support of these rights. And usually when somebody has achieved, they're not necessarily into cannabis or, part of this, but they've achieved the, perspective that it's better policy to, create, support these rights and abilities and get rid of these penalties and just over cannabis. They generally are very, very decent and thoughtful on a lot of issues. So I've noticed, they've gone through the process to figure this out. They know how to apply such a process, and they obviously came out on the right side of history if that's their view. So,
well, you wanted to talk about the CRA's upcoming meeting, Jamie, in September, and the different subjects that there are on that one.
Yeah, and there's a couple things related as well. And I guess Jake's not joining us. Maybe still will, but I had a good conversation with him earlier, and he had some decent input, and I kind of wanted to recreate some of that conversation on here. But he also said that he was very busy and, might not be able to make it. So that seems to be the case right now. So we'll have to do that some other time. But, I was on a meeting earlier in which the CRA was represented. There were some other representatives on there. And the excess grow question was kind of discussed. There was that's one of the ones that's on the upcoming public meeting. And, I just came away from that discussion and hearing, some of the questions. And it was Andrew Brisboe himself who there was a couple people there from the CRA, but it was, Andrew, I guess he's there till, is it September 17th or some cutoff date, but
September 17th, 21st, something like that.
Yeah. So he's still like kind of working, but, he's had somebody else with him. And he said, as many probably know, I'm going to be moving to another, thing. So I thought it'd be good to have this person with us. And, but he did a great job. I mean, we've seen him over the years kind of field a lot of these questions and stuff. But I get the feeling between a lot of the questions that Robin from director of MICIA, Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, a lot of the stuff he said that there's not much recourse now for the excess grow scenario that would be satisfactory to everybody. And we can go back to coulda, woulda, shoulda in the first place. This is my perspective, but the time to stop it, and probably point out that there might be authority issue with creating it in the first place was then, and the cat's kind of out of the bag now. So I'm not expecting there to be much action taken as far as that goes. Also, a lot of the small businesses are going to be in support of there being some type of from what I understand anyway, are going to be in support of there being some type of moratorium or power given to the regulator to be able to, stop issuing licenses, at least for cultivation for a while. I guess there's an example in Oregon, and they're appealing to that. And when that discussion comes up, that there might be a lot of support for it.
So I was with the director via Zoom on Monday morning. We had our monthly meeting for the Cannabis Consumer Connection, and regarding overproducer licenses, he said that was enacted by an administration rule, and you can't change it in the middle. You'd have to make another admin rule change in order to accomplish that. They start to consider those in January. So if they were to change it via an admin rule to eliminate that license type, that would be probably a JCAR has to approve those. That's at least mid-2023 before that pathway goes forward. The other way to do it, I suppose, would be through the legislature. But as it's a function of the cannabis or the CRMLA, that would require three-quarter supermajority in the House and Senate.
That's the way to do it. Change it legislatively, and it does require a supermajority. But excess is the answer.
Yes. Yep. So when Jamie
Thank you, Daryl.
and Matt Abel and Robin Snyder and others wrote the CRMLA, those of us who had input on it decided it was a good idea for us to not let there be super huge grows in the state. So we put a maximum of 5 Class C licenses that you could stack together.
Until 2023, I think is when somebody could get multiple licenses or something like that. So that's coming up by the time there could be a change anyway. That's why the cat's kind of out of the bag. So.
Yep. So, but we intentionally stopped that, and then the CRA, or back then the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, went ahead and overruled the limitation we put on there, and allowed.
There was a specific limitation. That's the point. Yes, they can make up new licenses as they see fit to help nurture the emerging industry and place things such as social use lounges or what have you, and maybe even some people are going to challenging it, but maybe even the new micro businesses would fall under their authority. But to do the excess grow thing based on that, when there was a specific limitation put on that for a period of time, it's so specific that you can't believe that the intent was for them to come in and just override this. It
was not. So that's the problem that we're stuck with now, is that initially when they launched it, they didn't feel there was enough cannabis in the system, so they wanted to let big growers get even bigger, on the theory that they could more easily scale up to deliver cannabis than someone else could from a fresh license. And now they've created this Frankenstein that is out of control. There are 111 excess producer licenses available in the state, already licensed in the state. 14 new licenses were issued last month alone. And we're drowning in cannabis in Michigan here. Although they may not call it that already, we are such at an overproduced state right now that it's hard to imagine how anyone logically would look at that and say this is a smart move for the industry.
And we might be joined by Jake too. He just texted me, so we'll see what goes on with that. But Robin's found that some of the big money interests don't want the moratorium on licenses. They'd rather see the bottom fall out and use their vast resources to be hanging around after other people get screwed over.
Well,
the inference is anyway.
Well, I'm not a fan of stopping the issuance of cultivation licenses myself. Frankly, we have social equity programs here in Michigan that are just getting started. They haven't even been realized. And I just want to point out,
just disclaimer. I'm sorry, Rick. I should have said this already. In some of the discussions, they did discuss a carve out for social equity when having these considerations and stuff like that. So you're exactly correct. And I neglected to bring that up. That was part of the conversation too.
Well, I brought that up to Brisboe yesterday, and I'm sure I'm not the first one to mention that, but I am sure that that's a message that resonates, that there's a group of people out there that we can't leave behind, and by maximizing out those cultivation licenses. So, of course, the logic being from what Jamie was just talking about vis-a-vis Robin's opinion, it certainly seems like larger corporations would be more capable of handling the bottom dropping out of the price of cannabis because they have deep pockets generated from successful stores in other states. So the real loser here is that small business, the little guy who's got every penny that they've ever earned invested in this particular venture, and it's going pretty good now. But at $110 an ounce in medical, I don't know how you make it there. And it's probably going to go even lower, Jamie. It's probably going to drop below $100 an ounce.
There's the infamous October time frame, Croptober, that exacerbates these issues, and that's coming right up. So
it's very saturated, the market is right now.
And there's a lot more plant. Well, as we know, there's a lot more plants, like as you can just discern from the metric data.
But if you take a look at potential federal legalization schemes where they propose to essentially open up state borders to transfer, that may seem like a relief to some of the large companies that may have a big stockpile here in the state. They would potentially go to other states and deliver to their markets. But that also is a huge vulnerability here in Michigan to cannabis that's overproduced from other states, where it's even less expensive to produce than it is here. So our $110 an ounce, maybe we could sell it at 75, but at Oregon, if they're selling it at 50 and they can ship it to you, you're probably buying that 50. So it's a bad deal for us.
Yeah, that like the concept of this international trade is it's got to get there at some point, but how to get there without just like fucking a lot of shit up and a lot of people being compromised and being screwed over essentially, is it's got to be a big part of the consideration.
Well, this is where I just mentioned lobbyists not that long ago. You've got a lot of corporate lobbyists from some of True Leaves and some of the Arcanas and the very large corporations across the North American continent. Let's not just talk about America, but let's talk about some of the big Canadian companies, Tilray and such. So those guys are whispering in legislators' ears, telling them that we need an open market, that we have to have free transfer of cannabis from one state to another, and they may not be hearing any alternative voices. And that's where having all that money to buy influence comes in at, having those lobbyists permanently stationed in those lawmaking centers so they can make those whispers. That's why the real guys lose out a lot.
Well, it's an issue that we refer to a lot. Even the lawmakers in support and with the best of intentions just don't have enough information to make the best decisions.
Last guy to whisper in their ear before the vote is usually how that goes. I remember being outside. One of the first experiences I had in the legislature in 2010, 2011, the House was going to vote on an important bill. And I was surprised by this whole row, like a wedding reception line, 2 rows, a wedding reception line going into the House of Representatives chambers. And it was all lobbyists making sure they had a chance to press the representatives on their issue one more time before they walked into the chamber to cast their vote. It seemed dirty. It seems so Rome before the fall. You know what I mean? It's just not the way that lawmaking is supposed to go in my idyllic world, I suppose.
No, it doesn't. I'm alone in believing it doesn't work like that. Taking information and vetting it properly to determine what's more likely true, and then determining what's best for the situation or for the masses or whatever the philosophy is, does not happen. And that's one of the things that's very frustrating about getting involved in being an activist about something and going to talk to lawmakers about an issue. There's just a lot of logic that just gets completely brushed aside. Decision-making doesn't rely on what's necessarily true.
Here's the other thing I find to be disgusting, Jamie, is that oftentimes lobbyists will advocate for a position based on someone paying them, and then 2 months later advocate against that position based on someone else paying them. Because when you're selling a lawmaker on a concept you don't even believe yourself, that's prostitution, man. I'm sorry, but that's not lawmakers taking in reasonable understanding of facts. That's just prostitution. So, that's ideally, I'd just like to see lobbyists reformed, the whole lobbying system reformed on a federal and state level. There's too much abuse. I look at somebody like our recently departed from the MCMA guy, Steve Linder, and I see all the influence that he wielded over the years, basically because he was paid to. He's just a good showman. And
his job. Yeah, he's a whore, just like a lot of them are there. And it's like you're professional and you take the position that you get paid to take.
Yep. And that just really sucks. Which,
hey, all right, we get to get involved in some more bitching surrounding the CRA, profoundly though, and with the help of the awesome
there he is,
Jake Greba from Midnight Roots. How you doing, man?
Hey, how you guys doing today? Can you hear me okay?
Good.
I'm in my car.
Yeah. Hey, somebody on here earlier said that they got to experience the owl, which is the
Jay Budd said he spoke with him.
Yeah, Jay Budd, said he got to check out the owl and loved it. So
we were out there at the blues event. That was pretty cool. The Blues Brothers event. It was great. It turned out great, man.
See you again.
It's a nice day. But the owls are what we're releasing next week. We're teaming up with Peninsula Gardens, and we're releasing like a 3-gram large joint, very similar to the old Magar that I was doing, but instead it's a little more advanced. We're using just a rice paper and really good flour, and not the hemp paper anymore. So
the rice paper burns better, more evenly, I think. I mean, I think there's a novelty. I mean, not that it doesn't work and it's not cool and all that kind of stuff, but it's not as probably functional or practical.
I prefer rice paper. I mean, if I smoke a joint like this or something, it's always a rice paper.
Right.
Usually it's Elements or something like that. I actually like the white ones just as much as the brown ones, right?
I've been
Hey, so
using these zigzag hemp lately. These zigzag hemp
those
too.
are fair. I kind of like those. I just want to interject here.
Yeah.
We were talking about some CRA stuff and the excess grows and the idea about cutting them off or whatever. But Baked Tater brings up something that was also discussed earlier today. And that is, people are going to be if you do cut them off, those who have them already are going to be grandfathered in. So now you have a situation where they just get them and nobody else can. So even if somebody who we might like has enough resources to compete, they wouldn't be able to get one in the future. So it's not like we'd be taking it away from anybody.
I mean, that's a point, but I mean, it stops the big monopolizing, there you have to start sometime, right? We can bitch and bitch.
But it doesn't, places are going to be able to get multiple licenses anyway, starting next year. So it does. I mean, we discussed that earlier. The timing just doesn't work out to be effective with doing anything anymore. With the way the change has to be made too through the administrative rules.
Yeah, there's a lot of non thought through laws, right?
Yeah.
Well, as we explained earlier, the way we drafted it would have been just fine if they'd stuck with what we said. But then the marijuana regulatory agency at that point put out the excess grower licenses.
We don't think they had the authority to do that. They twisted that out of the ability given to them to create new licenses. When they felt it would be necessary to help to support the emerging industry. But we were very specific about those limitations and over what period of time. And when that's the case, you can't interpret that as it being up for grabs just to change, but they
Jamie,
did.
Would you put Sean Owen's comment up real quick?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That Baked Tater was responding to?
I don't know if that is what Baked Tater was responding to. Sean said, do you see larger companies scaling back to create a demand eventually to bring the prices back up? We see larger companies scaling back, but it's not with the intent of creating a demand. I think it's because they can't afford to run operations as richly as they did previously. Everyone's gone to a lean operation. So we see Common Citizen with at least two waves of firings of employees. Other places are cutting back too, but I don't think it's with some grand scheme that they're master manipulating. I just think they're bleeding cash and they have to chop some excess production capability that's not really proving to be monetizable.
And Baked Tater's kind of going along with what Robin was picking up on or suggesting earlier about some of the big money interests just wanting to wait it out and let other people crumble in the meantime.
Yeah,
there is a lot of people that have that thought in the business right now that there are the big guys coming in. And I was even talking to you about the price of chocolate bars and stuff, but there are people taking losses on their product right now to secure that market space so that other people, I mean, I'm a small guy. I've got one SKU on the market, right? I mean, how small can you get? I mean, I'm doing what I did, but I mean, I got a chocolate bar, right? I mean, that's it. And there's people like that have 30, 40, 50 products on the market, 7 brands, there's multiple people that are out there. So there are that. We were just talking about that. People are, I mean, right now, like with this huge, what we were talking about with the 100 and 200 milligram fiasco, where that is also really hitting small business right now because their entire stock is wrapped up into 100.
Set that up a little bit. The med stores and being stuck with 100 milligram when they could have had 200 milligram and so forth. That's kind of like, I found that conversation to be really interesting earlier. Just give a little bit more background before you get into it, if you don't mind.
Yeah. For example, I mean, what you were talking about though, with the whales taking, we'll preface it like that, with the whales, how I call them, who are taking a loss to secure market share, and then everybody else can't take that loss. I mean, I can't produce for a loss. I just don't have the money to do it. I mean, you got to at least be able to pay your bills and your employees and your rent and stuff like that. So it's these guys are taking the loss, and now with this big thing where they took the rec and they changed it over to where now you can have 200 milligram edibles, where it was just 100 2 weeks ago, right? So that was the preface, is that right now there's a huge another hit that small business is going to take. And so now, we all think that's a great thing. Hell, I mean, I think it should be unlimited. You want a 10,000 milligram chocolate bar? Let's do this. You know what I mean? Nobody's dying. Nobody's died at all from any of that stuff, right? I've never heard of anybody dying from too much. I've ate 5 chocolate bars myself, and I thought I died.
I don't recommend that for our viewers. Please don't do that. Don't do the Jake thing.
Well, under controlled circumstances.
You know, but the whole idea is that, so let's say, for example, me, we have 200 milligram med bars, we have 100 milligram chocolate bars. We've been producing, we're making stuff, we have stock at our warehouse, we have our buyers. Now, boom, they change it. Now it's 200 milligram bars. So all of our stock is now worth cost, you know, because I've heard of people today selling their rec bars for $1, $2 a bar. Just get it out of here, because nobody wants 100 milligram bars anymore. So everything that I put into all the money, everything we've got is all in hundreds. And that's not just me. There's tons of retailers like that. So all these little shops that just set up and opened up last week, and they have their entire selection is all rec 100 milligrams. Well, you can't switch that over within 2 weeks, where the big guy next door, I'm not going to say any names, but the big guy next door is able to blow those out, you know, flip their stock, get the 200s in, you know, now boom. So there's a lot of fiasco around.
Is it Skymint?
No, but you know what I'm saying.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. You said you didn't want to say. I was going to goad it out of you.
He was just pushing it. So, Jake, the other thing is, though, if you're one of those big companies and you haunt the CRA and you're constantly bothering those people and talking to them, you might get the word that this is on its way and maybe stop production a week before your competitors do, and therefore save your ass from overproducing a product that doesn't really have a market anymore.
Yeah,
it was designed to fix a problem in the first place. That's
right. If we had a lobby guy that was going to, you know, give us those things, but that's like insider trading, and I'm a small guy. I don't have the lobby guy that's in there going, "Hey, Jake, hey, I heard this dude. I was on the golf course last week and we were smoking a joint, and I'm not that guy," right?
That's my point. The good people lose again because we don't have those deep pockets. Why do we keep trying to create advantage for those deep pocket guys? They're already winning.
And speaking of that, Baked Tater makes another point. I agree with this. I think this Baked Tater happens to have some decent perspective on things going on. In my opinion, this is
I mean,
true.
most of this shit is investor money, and nobody's made plans, man. I've dodged so many bullets, you know, right now. I mean, if you were to buy a $2 million grow last year, that same grow is $400,000 this year. You know, I mean, there are a lot of people that lost their ass just buying real estate last year, thinking they're going to set up stuff. I could name 5 people right now that bought $2 million properties that you couldn't get $500,000 right now for them, and they don't have the money to build it because of COVID. So you can't.
Do you think people should? Do you think people should just take their chances on, if they want to get involved and get a cultivator license, and understanding it's, it's saturated and it's going to be very competitive. Yet, they believe they've got what it takes to, to edge out stuff and be able to fix the marginals, or they're looking at a possible moratorium on this stuff. I mean, do you think that's necessary based on what's going on with the saturation and stuff like that, or?
The cream will rise to the top, and those who want to be in it will be in it. It's like a restaurant, right? I mean, you see a lot of restaurants make it a ton, but restaurants make 10%, right? 10 to 15% margins at most, right, on their food. So these guys that last year, 2 years ago, were making 400% margins on their pre-rolls, and the guys that are buying, wax for, $2 and selling it for $20, these guys are not able to do these anymore. So some of these the money that these what do you call them, contractors or people like me would come in and say, hey man, you grow this, you're going to make this amount of money, right? It's not there anymore. You're not getting $4,200 a pound anymore. You're not getting $60 for distillate a gram anymore. There were $60,000 liters of distillate just a year and a half ago, right? Now it's down to $250. Right? I mean, that is so insane if you can think about
$5,000 pounds for a while.
Yeah. When we released the first Magars, they were $4,800 for like the best weed we could find, right? It was like, what? So those prices were crazy. Now you can find the best weed for $1,500, $1,000, right? Top
right.
shelf. So it's crazy. And how do you explain that to an investor? How do you explain that to? How do you act like you're a consultant? That's the word I was looking for. How do you act like you're a good consultant? I'm going to give these guys good advice, and it's changing every week. Right now, we're going to make all this money. Let's make all these gummies at 100 milligrams. they're $2. Now, next thing you know, oh, those are worthless. We need 200s. Oh, we got to off this. I mean, everybody's just bleeding money. It's just bleeding money. But I mean, if you can make it through these next 6 months and, you stick it out and survive, the market, I believe, is going to change because half the growers are going to fall out. And it's like any year, people stop growing in the summer, so the prices come back up. Right? It's just how it's going to happen.
In all of the other oversaturated market.
You can't produce for these numbers. I mean, indoors, $800 a pound. How are you going to sell your shit for $600 or even $900? You know what I mean? It's like you're making $100 on a pound, and that's you can't operate like that. The big whales can for so long, but then they can't for so long. After a while, they're like, I'm just going to go buy a Subway. After a while, they're like, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? Unless they really love it. I mean, I just watched the guy from the place I just left retire last week. For the same reason. He's just like, this is crazy. This market is just crazy. You got to love it, though. I mean, I'm
sure a lot of people
who
can are stepping out. Yeah.
I mean, employees. Yeah, I mean, I'm not in it. I'll be in it forever. So it's like I'm not leaving anywhere. I don't even talk like this. I couldn't even tell you on a phone that I had an ounce for you. You'd
Right.
be texting it to me in a code. My mama's got 2 balloons or something like that. It's like, so at least we're here.
Right. Red Center brings up how the saturation is affecting all the other markets that aren't necessarily of the commercially licensed approach too. So
yeah.
Well,
The
when you have a market like it is.
The real estate market all over. Sorry.
No, sharks are everywhere when you have a market like this. So it's tough to make ends meet, and then it's also tough to dodge the people that are trying to wheel you out of your money. So
yeah, I mean, and the worst part about this business that I hate is that you can't get a fucking trademark. You can't get you can't get patents legally. You can't have a bank account at certain banks. There's like 4 banks in Michigan that even deal with us. You know what I mean? So like, what are we talking about? You can't go to a bank. I got my PayPal shut down because I sold some CBD a year ago on there. It was like, what? I mean, it's just crazy. It's not what we hope it would be. We would like to think it is there, but like we were talking before, some of these things could be on purpose. I don't like to go conspiracy, but Jesus Christ, man, some of these guys leaving at the right time and these moves. Because I was saying, what else could shut down the med market but bring the rec market to the exact same place? I mean, what is the med market now? What are all these shops in Detroit doing? What they got 200 milligram bars, so does the guy down the street, I mean,
yep.
It's weird.
Used to be med was an advantage, and now med really isn't an advantage. And in fact, the number of medical patients shrunk, 17% in a single month this year. It just continues to go down lower and lower. We're down close to, I think, 200,000 patients, maybe even below that now. So as a program, the medical situation in Michigan is just, I guess, right-sizing itself down to just a small core. And that's not anything you can build a business around. You can't build a retail business around servicing just those particular people. So.
No, well, that could be what they wanted, though. If they equaled them out, then they get rid of the med on the metric market. And then the med is only to the caregivers. And that's kind of what they wanted. Okay, you guys want 5 caregivers? Here, have your 5 caregivers. That's it. Because there's nowhere else you're going to sell. We don't even have a med market anymore for them to take it in the back door or something. You know what I mean? It's just, it is what it is. So it's...
There's a desire to combine licenses or to meld everything into one license. How that's done is to how good or bad that will turn out. I mean, getting rid of this commercial medical program is fine with me. It's not a very good program at all, but there are a few things that need to be preserved. One thing that got addressed was, I know we don't like some of the consequences of it right now, but is the matching up the limitations on the infused milligrams and stuff like that. The other would be like those patients who are 18 to 20
I forgot about that. Yeah, for sure. Because it does limit it to the 21-year-old, and it is a medicine. I mean, it is. It's a sacrament to some even,
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, putting the limitations that they do on it are weird in its own, and the fact that, I mean, they got to be able to let people grow more than 12 plants. I mean, you know, they really, or at least make it so everybody in the house can grow 12 plants. You know, each person can.
I don't see the legislature giving us any.
I can smoke fucking 2 ounces a day, so I have no idea how I could ever grow 12 plants worth. You know, it's
It's on the stock, yeah.
I know a lot of people that could do that.
Well,
they're just like,
under the MRTMA, if you can go up to 24 plants, and if anybody were, you know, who cares, who could enforce law, were to come across it for one reason or another, it would result in a civil infraction ticket at most. So you can kind of give your, you know, just do what you want to do, but just know
I'm not
that
super hip on what you're doing with that. Maybe I haven't studied it that much. That new bill.
Well, so
well, there's a lot of good stuff, but it's not perfect. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I think you know, when we get into it, the new version of Michigan Initiative for Community Healing we're looking at might actually address, you know, home grow personal possession limits for cannabis as well as other plants, because we're looking at not just psychedelic plants this time, but all plants.
So you do that by changing things in the code where all those things are, so it's all under the same section, and so they're all affected. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. That's awesome. I've always liked that about your organization's approach on that language.
Well, I mean, so the last version that we've tried for wouldn't have done that, but some of the new things we're talking about will affect cannabis, I think, in a positive light as well.
Very cool.
Specifically,
So, I mean,
no limit,
these
home
deal with-
grow, and gift.
Go ahead, Jake. I'm sorry.
I was just wondering, none of these bills deal with what I have a problem with is breeding, right? And I'm just wondering, because like a lot of times, you know,
Well, you could conceivably
I'll
need
crack
like
24
several hundred plants or thousands of plants, right? Or I mean, to do it right, to do like on a
Yeah, you'd want as many as you can, right?
Right.
I mean, you want
The
to
pheno hunt.
you want to look through.
Yep.
That's the whole point of it, and to search and to find these things. So, I mean, none of these nothing. Like I don't see anybody dealing with new propagation, new breeding. Very rarely. I mean, there's a couple of places, clone spots popping up, right? I've seen a couple where they're dealing with it, but then you'd have to have a license to do breeding, of course, right? So it's weird. Like I think you know, in the caregiver laws, it does still allow 72 is enough to at least do some minor breeding. You know, I mean, we've been able to work
a
with
breeding license would probably be the way it would get started. I mean, before just saying, "Hey, do what you need to do to breed," you know, that'd probably be officially recognized, you know, through being a part of the system, and you know, before it could be opened up to just, you know, at large doing what you need to do. What happened to no changes? You know, that's always been, I think we've had this discussion before.
No changes was about the caregiver bills. That's what it was about.
It's
and we always recognize there were positive changes that could be made. So it's a stupid interpretation of that phrase to try and twist it to something that it was never intended to be.
Right. It has to do with negative changes. There are positive changes we could talk about, but we'd have to, like, you know, the line is drawn at, if anybody, you know, when you open up the act, people try to claw in there, you know, the lines are drawn at which thing peels something back and which thing makes a more sensible, more broad and liberal approach. And it's, you know, simple to no changes, response to a lot of people who want to like peel existing rights and privileges back and get rid of them out of ignorance.
Well, it's somebody who's trying to be critical, who wants to do something to try and throw up in our face. And I'm just not fucking accepting it because it's an incorrect interpretation of what was said. So shut the fuck up with that. I'm done.
You know, and Jen brings up, you know, it's caregivers and home grows are protected. It doesn't really matter what happens in the commercial market. That's been a lot of people's perspective on this from the early days when we were getting criticized for the locally not state recognized, you know, activity, and sometimes even locally challenged activity, you know, just based on the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act itself and nothing else. And there was a lot of controversy. which way it's headed. But people say, look, do what you need to do, but don't peel back any of these. And I still agree with that 100%. Don't.
There's no reason for us to move backwards. The only direction is forward, giving us more rights, more privileges, more access, not rescinding things by making it more difficult for caregivers to operate in local communities, or making rules about making it harder to become a patient or to qualify for adult use. Stupid.
Yeah. The other thing. Go ahead.
Is that what you were talking about earlier? Was the growing limit, the large scale growing limit?
Yeah. The excess grows. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you recap what you were saying? Because that was a big conversation that I did want to listen to what you're saying. Because
I'll give some headlines.
That is a really strange, conversation. Because at the one point, it's like, do what you want, like a tomato farm. And the other point, it's like monopoly, you're going to monopolize it and, you're going to take it over and kill all small business. Right.
Yeah, and our intention was to slow that whole process down by putting limitations and time limits. Limitations on the amount and limitations for the amount of time where you had to stay within those amounts. And the state, and we believe, outside of their intended authority, allowed for these things. In part, the argument was to utilize the entities that have the resources and ability to create more cannabis to get it into the market that needed inventory sooner. Obviously that helped to contribute also to the saturated market that we have now. So we're like, okay, cut that shit out. But that has to be done by a change in administrative rules, which happens, yearly at the beginning of the year. And that wouldn't happen until 2023. And in 2023, people can buy multiple licenses again. The time limit that we put on there would be lifted, even if it reverted back to it. So the cat came out of the bag already. So.
Okay, I see what you're doing. I crossed my mind again. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It sucks. We wish it never would have happened, but it did. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's a big
topic.
Go
ahead. There's about 111 licenses out right now, Jake, for those excess producer licenses, and they just issued 14 licenses last month, according to the CRA's report.
Sorry,
you you're on my show. I'm not on your show, motherfucker. Don't try and attack me on my own show. If you want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation in a format where it's equal, but you're on my show. So we don't entertain people who want to be assholes. That's it. Done. Jamie, don't show his comments anymore. Fuck that guy.
Is that what the comment? That's what I was reading. Sorry. I heard that. I got lost.
No, it's just, it's stupid. You want to come on my show and then attack me? No. So,
well, I think in part it might not be as well known. Like when somebody is going to be critical, there's a lot of information that's just not known, so there's no point.
Yeah, and there's a format for us to have that discussion. This is not it. We're talking to Jake and we're talking to Mike. We don't need to have a side conversation about something ridiculous, which is why, we should just be done with it. Like the 5th time I've said that.
What does he want to talk about?
He wants to be critical about remember we put out the no changes thing. We said no changes to the Caregiver Act.
And then sometimes we talk about positive changes and then people say, I thought you just said no changes, and then we have to say, well, we mean the stupid negative peeling back right shit. And it's, it's kind of inferred and it's also kind of like somewhat obvious if you don't want to.
But it's been explained on the show while he was on, in comments several times. So he already knows the explanation. He's just trying to poke.
Okay, I guess the argument is then who gets to decide if it's positive or negative, right?
Well, and let's have a conversation about that in a format that's not this show.
Yeah, I feel you on that for sure. So
I don't want to not have a conversation. I just want to do it in the right place, and this show isn't it. We're
right, and that does require conversation because then you do things like describe usage of words when it's really necessary in order for everybody to be clear on what's being discussed, and
there's a valid back and forth which is supposed to help illuminate the issue, and we can't really have that in this format where one person's in the chat and one person's on live video. It's really not fair to the person on the chat. That's why we should have it in a different format than what we're doing right now.
But you do want to continue to talk about it now.
Yeah,
from what I understand.
Yeah,
okay.
That's Jamie's interpretation.
Yeah, I feel it. It's hard to have a podcast. Everybody wants to say their opinions, and there's a million.
It's all good. we don't take the sensational side of things too often. We've slipped into that stuff and close to it just from time to time based on the subject matter, but we don't tend to get into that too much.
Were you guys talking about that earlier or something, or no?
He just randomly throws criticisms out. So, which is why he shouldn't be elevated to the point. So. Right.
But one of the other things that's going to be discussed, and I was bringing it up just to round it out, and I wasn't necessarily interested in getting too deep into it, but there's a discussion on allowing an expansion of how many micro businesses somebody could be a part of or have a stake in, and there's discussion of like expanding that from 1 to 5. The reason it was 1 was specifically so that it would be something set aside and designed for a small business scenario, and and if somebody with a lot of resources wanted to do it, they couldn't do that in addition to other businesses and have several of those smaller licenses or a combination of larger licenses and micro licenses. So it was designed to have a real small business scenario. I'm not necessarily against some people.
What would be the benefit of having a bunch of multiple micro businesses rather than a class A or something? You get the whole thing. You get retail and processing and grow in each micro, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to pay transport either, do you? Right?
No,
if it's on the same lot, there's no transport, but you'd have to pay transport if it was in different addresses.
They know, but they all have to be. These things have to be housed under the same address, so that vertical integration is built in. Yeah,
there you go.
Be right there.
Right. Yeah. So
you get that benefit too, right? Yeah.
I think some of the smaller guys could benefit from it, and I understand too that. You can see a different.
The whole.
You're weaving in and out just a little bit, Jake. That's why it's kind of hard,
Yeah, I'm just trying to see how people would take it.
Right.
Is that
a few different ways of looking at it? I mean, the original intention, might not necessarily, now that things have started to play out and stuff, be as important to everybody. It still might be something to kind of preserve for a lot of people's perspective. I think there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. I'm not sure if I would spend a whole lot of time and energy opposing or supporting if it starts moving in a certain direction. I'm not sure yet. I'd have to, I guess, to make that determination when we're really faced with that.
The micro business is an interesting topic, man. It's something that's very overlooked. It's an interesting part of the market that I almost always
it's been
think about.
It's been purposely attacked and suppressed by big money interests too, and a lot of localities haven't been as warm to it as all the other licenses available.
Yeah, it's got a bunch of special rights and rules to it. I can see it being beneficial in this climate for somebody that's doing a craft grow and doesn't want to be Budweiser and make zillions of dollars and just make enough money to have a good product. And, you know what I was watching the other day? Speaking of that, there's a guy in Japan that sells strawberries for $400 a strawberry, right? These strawberries that he breeds, and they're just amazing. These strawberries, I don't know. You Google search the $400 strawberry guy in Japan. He breeds them.
I think strawberry. I think. Sean asks, is a micro license off the table? Look at the craft brew type setup that could evolve for some. That's what we always thought of like that, but craft brews basically service just a local area. So if you're a micro business in a small town, that might be a really tough business model. If you're a micro business in a larger town, you probably have a lot of competitors around you, which is also a tough business model.
Yeah, Scott Roberts used to talk about some rural areas where there weren't many options around, and as Jake said, you didn't have the dollar signs in your eyes, and you weren't expecting huge numbers, but maybe a couple $100,000 a year if you set it up correctly. And so that could be true. I will say that Winewood Organics in Ann Arbor seems to, first of all, have gone through the process.
If you had that $400 strawberry.
Yeah, they have $400 strawberries in there, and people are willing to pay it. But
Yeah, I've
you
heard
know,
some
they,
good
they
things
got
about it.
into it by way of the original intention of the micro business to have an accessible way for, you know, caregiver type growers to scale up. And he runs it well, and he kind of like fits that image that you're talking about, Jake, like the, you know, all those things you could do. And if you're really, you know, crafty about it. And I asked him about the micro business A, which is the same thing, except for you can buy infused products from the wholesale market is basically the difference. And instead of having to process them yourself. But I asked him about that. He said, no, I want to process this shit myself. I want to make these products in a certain way. And, you know, that's all part of our brand here is doing the original micro business idea. So it works for them. It's not that common, but it really works for them.
I guess if you've got your stuff already dialed in, right? If there's no learning curve, then maybe the micro business you can be successful with. There's just no room for error when you have such a small operation like that. I mean, most people that are starting out know if you have one bad harvest, it can just sink your whole business.
Yeah, there's no provision for, you know, something that wipes out your existing garden or something. There's nothing that except for time to replace that.
Crop insurance.
Yeah. Or I mean the physical product.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you got to be good at everything. You got to be good at retail. You got to be a good processor, and you got to be a good grower. I mean, and you got to have something that the next guy doesn't have down the street for half the price because he can produce it for half the price, and he's got robots working in his room, you know, drones in his room or something, you know. So, I mean, I get it. The whole not being able to buy from other people is a strange rule with it because, like, let's say they wanted to buy, you know, whoever's M&M's weed or something that's going to come out, you know. I mean, you could throw them that bone, you know, let them be able to buy what they want from somebody else, maybe because, I mean, you got to produce it all. So you got to do it all. You have a good processor. That's hard. You got to have a good grower. You got to have a good retail staff. I mean, what if your processing went down? What if your grow went down and you couldn't do anything? Your whole model just shuts down, right? It's all dependent on how much you're growing. And what if you get bigger than you're growing for? What if your little shop is doing great because you got those $400 strawberries and people want them a lot? You can't produce enough now, you know, because you got it, you know. So it's an interesting model. I like it. I do. I think it's super cool and interesting.
I really want to see, long-term 2, 3 years, 4 years, where someone is able to take a micro business. Sean was in a comment talking about Bells and Founders, which are a couple of very successful craft breweries here in the state of Michigan. I'd love to see that. And of course, it takes a couple of years to realize that dream. So the people that are having success now, I mean, I'm excited about where they could take it. I'd love to see that kind of a community develop within the Michigan cannabis industry. That would be awesome.
As much as I'd love to see that, what happens with Bells and Founders? They get bought out by that national corporation from out of state, you know, like we're back to
all those forces are here too, and it's probably inevitable, but you know, I guess we fight in between and don't just hand it over, man.
They make all their money selling to the big retail shops. If you're a micro business, you don't have that same ability. You can't be a really good, Jake's micro business over there, and you're killing it with your $400 strawberries, and then all of a sudden, whoever fucking Skymint wants to buy your $400 strawberries for $800. You're like, I can't sell it to you, sorry, or let's say somebody you like, down the street, Botanical company or something, you sell, wants it, you can't sell them your $400 strawberries. So there's weird place, a niche, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a strange niche.
Joe Sullivan wants to know if you bought a $400 strawberry. Jake, what's up?
No, I'd love to, man. What's up, Joe? No, fucking Google search that thing, put it up. It's super cool. It's super interesting to watch a guy. Actually, he can't make enough of them. He's got like a little hoop house in his backyard in Japan, and he grows and breeds these crazy strawberries that taste like, like cotton candy grapes or, fucking orange weed or something. He's got these crazy strawberries that are just amazing. And, hell, it's
I'd love to see that.
Same thing with craft beer. hopefully the weed, that we can get back to some really craft grows. And the micro license idea is like a great idea. It's a great idea. It just needs like refining a little bit. I don't know how it could be.
Probably, well, the A version,
right?
the micro business A, where you could buy infused products.
Right? Yeah, because I couldn't go back if I have my midnight bars and my shit, right? I couldn't go and get a micro license, and then now my midnight bars I can only sell at Jake's shop, right? You know what I mean? Like there's weird restrictions on it. Now I go in one place to get the midnight bar. You're like, well, why can't I sell that to everybody?
It's a
weird.
big state.
Weird. It's strange.
Only one retail store, and you're right. That is the difference between Bells and Founders in our industry with the micros, the ability to sell away from your store. That's huge.
That limits fucking crazy, man. I mean, because we all know that, you got 20 shops in Ann Arbor, and each Ann Arbor shop doesn't get all of Ann Arbor. They don't all go to everyone. Each one gets their little area,
But that's what you sign up for with that license. I mean, you can choose to have a smaller garden. You can choose to have 100 plant garden, the Class A garden, and be craft and be able to distribute it to any store that you want to. You can still do that model if that's the way you want to approach the industry. But when you take the micro business scenario, you sign up for keeping everything contained.
That's why I find it a strange model. It's interesting, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you got to go visit wherever the dude is. Like if a guy's in, Oxford, you got to go to Oxford to get these $400 strawberries. There's no other place you can go get this dude's strawberries from. It's
pretty soon there's going to be,
you can't
hopefully, if everything.
Nothing.
I'm sorry, man. It weaves in and out. So sometimes I think it's sometimes we think it's okay to interject something and it crosses over what you're saying, man, because it's weaving in and out just a little bit. No big deal. But so I mean, that's the point of this, and that stuff can be used, especially in a market like that. So people do want to go out of their way to get particular, very crafty, product or whatever. There's a, niche for that. And if you, get enough people around your immediate area, of course, that are into that. I know when I go to Ann Arbor, Winewood is where I go now. I can rely on it. I like it. It's all good there. We're looking at maybe doing some work with those guys for some branding and stuff. And those who kind of, distinguish themselves in this rough time, can do okay. They seem to be hitting those things that you would expect, the positives that you could draw out of that self-contained kind of model, and and be able to utilize your skills so directly like that. And so it's probably not that common, but they seem to be kind of doing it, and they've got some bubble hash that is find everywhere. And I know some people go out of their way to get that product from them, and some of their other stuff too. Carts are really good. So, but it's not that common though.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
Yeah,
I'll visit them.
Yeah, they're very cool. We hung out with John Sinclair the other day and had a really great discussion with him, and those guys came out and supplied some good cannabis for us, and we had a good time. And Trish, who could join us if she so chose, was saying hello, friends.
Hello.
Sean Owens asked if we know how the rules were changed to allow Bells and Founders to sell elsewhere. Isn't that always a possibility to have that changed? I think the alcohol rules were never made so that a microbrew would be exclusive to itself. So I don't think they had to change rules to allow that.
Hasn't that been the case though? Sometimes
I don't know. Honestly, I'm lacking in this knowledge.
I think that there has been some, evolving in what they can do over the years.
I stand corrected then. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
I don't follow that well. I just seem to kind of remember that story or that change.
Well, now I'm going to research that, because now that's curious. I'd like to follow a model that's already successfully been proven in Michigan. And if we can use that as a pathway towards modifying the micro business in a way that makes it more workable, and that we can get more examples of that around the state,
right,
that'd be worth pursuing.
And see if they have to go through the distributors direct, probably, or maybe there's some provision there where you can bypass that stuff. I don't know. Find out, I guess. Yeah. Find out what that model actually is.
Those setups are pretty impressive when you go into some of those bars that actually have the brewing system right there with the big vats and the kettles and all of the stainless steel piping that goes from place to place. It's really neat. It's very sciencey, you know.
So Steve is saying there's limitations, and based on that, there's part of the definition of when you are micro or bigger, I guess.
Wow.
Which could make sense. We do that with plant counts and shit like that, you know. So.
Yeah. Now we do limit plant counts in the micro business too. So that is a very, very parallel comparison. Nice. I always thought that is more of a casual thing that wasn't really as lockstep as it's just turning out to be. Cool.
You know, I wanted to hear some. I also wanted to just on the side just mention that maybe get a little bit of information going. Yeah, it's only one offsite store, so basically, so you could go to another. The one thing you can do though, is as a micro business, is participate in the licensed cannabis events and distribute if you get a vending space.
I think there was one.
That's a way you could be somewhere else. Yeah.
I think there was one at the Blues Infused one, a Sun Provisioning. I think they're a micro, right? They're out of
Canada Jam Fest had a micro grow there too.
Yeah,
so
they were cool.
And when it's an equal sized booth, if it's a 10 by 10 square, you're on equal footing. It doesn't really matter what corporate sponsorship you have. It's about whose cannabis smells best to the nose as the people walk through. So that's a great venue.
Might be some cost considerations for some people, but
truth.
But yeah, but as far as quality goes, and those who are seeking that, they can probably find it there for sure. I know that's the case at Winewood Organics, for sure. But, I wanted to, since you're here, and it's not directly cannabis, although music is very associated with cannabis generally, but both of our guests are very good musicians, as a matter of fact. And I know, Jake, that you've been actually working on some stuff and putting some stuff out. There's stuff available maybe that's relatively new for people. Isn't that right? Haven't I been seeing some of that?
Yeah. You want to talk about some music? Yeah, for sure. Of
course.
Why not? We talked about the John Sinclair stuff. Midnight Roots did sponsor with his Funky D Studios release, the one he's releasing, finally going to be releasing nationwide. So Midnight Roots does support John Sinclair and all his poetry and everything. He's the greatest. I always loved his shit. But I do now. I mean, I used to play with the Howling Diablos, who pretty much Tino plays drums with him and Jeff plays guitar with him. And they used to play with me when I played with him in like 99 to 2003. But now I do techno under the acronym Stone Owl. So I do techno and produce. I just had a release on Refused Records. You can find my stuff stoneowl.co or Instagram Stone Owl Music, or Stone Owl.
And the recurring owl theme here.
I like owls. It's deeper, darker techno, bass heavy. I use a lot of 303s. It's a lot of analog gear. Go to SoundCloud Stone Owl. Or Beatport Stone Owl, or YouTube, or I have a Spotify, Pandora. You can find it on most venues. Spotify has most of my stuff on there. So, but yeah, that's what I'm doing.
I remember the days of the Bears Den.
Those are legendary, man. Those are legendary. Every Sunday we'd have people. I remember playing with. I played with Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers there, right? Of course, Kid Rock was there every week. They had all his crew. It was fun. Eddie Harsh, right, would play there all the time with us from the Black Crows. That was fun. Yeah, Royal Oak was our stomping ground. Magic Bag.
And when you talk about supporting John and getting ready for that, he did a gig. It was the first one he did in a while after being in the hospital and having some health issues and stuff. And he did that. That was in support of what you're talking about at the Magic Bag in June, right?
Yeah, Funky D Records threw a record release party for his record and Tino G and the Dumpster Machines record. So they both had a record release party because they're both under the same label. And John came out. I actually played with with Tino and played some of the old Howling Diablos tracks with them. It was fun.
Very nice.
But yeah, it was a good night. It was really fun. They actually had the kids from the School of Rock concert come out, and because John used to be the manager of the MC5, they went and played 2 MC5 songs. These little kids did. It was pretty dope. It was fun.
Very cool.
I hope it wasn't kicked out the jams, motherfuckers, but
I think they played it. I think they didn't say motherfuckers though.
I thought Wayne Kramer was just on stage. Maybe it was Hoxeyville or one of the others. I just saw that in an article recently, and I thought, how great. He's still kicking it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's
it's like Mike slipped off. Hopefully he comes back on. But and I know that we've had Tom Wall on here. A lot of us are Cosmic Knot fans, and been able to check out what we refer to as, here he's coming back on, as we refer to as like jamming with the plant, kind of a thing. And I know that you kind of do your own take on that type of thing.
Yeah.
Have you been doing that much lately, or what's going on with that?
Isn't that crazy? That's how I met him too. It's like I have that same piece of gear that records inputs from electro sources, and so does he.
I can't hear anything.
There you go.
Can you hear now? But either way, he Tom's great, man. It was like we both started posting the things at the same time, and I was doing it with techno. I would use it to have the plant trigger like notes on my Moog or on some of my other synths, because it basically sends trigger notes to whatever you want, and he has it set up to play some certain melodies and certain things that he can play along to. But it's random because the plant sends random notes, so the randomness of the plant is what's really cool. And then the other things that you could do to try to affect the plant's song by what it's doing, I kind of look at it like it's the neurotransmitters of a plant sending signals, or a heartbeat of a plant, kind of. I don't know how to I'll say it, because it's really Can you hear now, Mike?
What the hell's going on? You're missing out on a lot of good shit, man.
Yeah, but he Tom's taking it to the next level. He's really doing a lot of really cool stuff with like the redwood trees, and he did this one where he had like a hoop where he had people walk through this like garden, and you could touch the plants, and the plants were all set up to play different instruments. So the little device that he has, it's called a plant wave, and it plays, it'll play certain tones and things, and you can set it up to play different things. So all these plants were playing in harmony, and you'd walk through it, and then it was a super dope setup. Yeah, super dope setup. It really was. Very, very creative use of it.
Well, the fact that there's a random, underlying approach, and yet they come together and are harmonizing or jamming with songs and stuff like that. I mean, I guess that's what makes it kind of interesting, because if they're capable of just throwing off random stuff, but they're actually doing something that's somewhat in a controlled zone, that's kind of, that's where the interesting stuff is, right?
So good point, right? Tom plays a very jazzy like jam band rendition of it, right? Stone Owl, but a very jazzy like rendition of it. And because he would play to, let's say the plant's just playing, where I'm playing techno music, right? So techno tends to play obviously to a beat. So for example, if the I would try to find the rhythm in the notes that the plant is playing, and I'll find them. I don't know what it's going to be. It could be 60 beats per minute. It could be 180 beats per minute. You just got to try to find, I don't know, patterns in what's being played, right? And Tom kind of plays more in a free form, right? He'll play, and he just kind of goes where the plant plays, kind of more like Grateful Dead-y or Fish-like, where it just kind of jazzy and it just kind of plays. But techno is locked into a groove. So the fun part about it is that it does have both. There are weird time signatures to the plant, and when you can find it, it's not always in what you think it is. If you can find it in a 3/4 or a 5/4 time or a 7/8, You know, you can find rhythms in it and you can make beats to it on the fly. And that's the fun part, is that it's very improvisational, right? So that's the whole point of it. It's to be on the fly. And that's the fun part about music. And that's what I love about bands and playing in bands. And I miss from doing techno is that there's a lot more improvisation in it. And it's a little different when you have multiple people and multiple inputs, right? So usually the plant is just one input, right? So it's just playing one pattern, and then you got 5 other people that can play to that pattern or something, right? It's super fun. It's really interesting that 2 people in the same state, really close to each other, doing like almost the same thing. I mean, because he breeds and he grows and he's a really intelligent dude. And we're doing the same thing in the same state at the same time, right around the same thing. And we're doing with different instrument, because he has one that's called the Plant Wave. I've got another one that's it's called the MIDI Sprout, I think. But it does the same thing. Mine just allows more integration with MIDI, and it allows more integration with like my synthesizers and stuff, where his kind of has a speaker on it. So his can actually play. He can go travel with it and set it down, and the plants will play through this little speaker. And mine, I have to plug into my system, and it kind of triggers notes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a little different idea to the whole thing, but it's still fun to have that random improvisational thing and have it be a plant, because we all do believe that plants are living creatures. And I mean, they're completely different living creatures, and they live on their own timelines, and they live at their own time schedules and their own times, and it's fun to interact with them, and it's fun to interact with them musically, because it is the language that everybody knows. Let it be rhythm or harmony, right? One of the two. There's a lot to it. You don't always have to be harmonic with it. You can be very rhythmic with it, which is the kind of the direction I'm taking, where Tom is taking, like, let's just take this harmony and run with it, just jazz it up, you know. It's fun. It's really cool.
It's really cool. Yep.
I see Tom. I might see him this weekend at that Gems and Genetics show that we're doing. Yeah. So I'll be at that thing.
Florganoleptic music. Florganoleptic, I believe is what it is.
Yeah, that's right. That's what he calls it. Floriogenic, I think he calls it. Florogenic.
Right. Yep.
Isn't that what? Yeah.
It makes more sense. Florogenic music.
Florogenic. Yeah. He just created that name because there was a dude in like the early 70s that was doing stuff like this and created these types of ideas. And it was around the same time that Clive Baxter guy was doing some weird shit with plants, right? You know, where he was hooking them up to polygraph machines.
Can you hear?
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear now?
You can hear now.
Clive Baxter. You familiar with Clive Baxter? Are you familiar with Clive Baxter? Doctor?
No.
He's the guy that hooked up rubber plants.
The name's familiar, but
yeah,
I don't know who that is.
He hooked up rubber plants to EKG and lie detectors, and that triggers electronic reactions. So he would do different things in the room, like have krill or a small shrimp drop into a boiling hot water at a certain random time, and see if the EKG machine would go off when those would drop. And it would all be random because you'd never know when it was going to go off, and they would see if the spikes happened. And there was different things like that like all of a sudden the plant would freak out when the krill fell into the boiling water. And he could do that like in Japan and think about it, and the plant would like react too. He would think about like burning the plant or breaking its leaf, and the plant would freak out and shit like that. It's really interesting, some of his work. I mean, there is a little bit of controversy around it because a lot of people had a lot of hard time recreating his work, of course. But at the same time, very interesting to read.
It's cool. Yeah, it's cool, but right, it should be tempered a little bit because it's not, hasn't been made conclusive. So where is Gems and Genetics taking place?
It is in Morley.
And Red Setter's going to be there too. Okay.
Yeah, we are north, right?
Yeah, it's about 45 minutes north of Grand Rapids. Take 131 north, get off at exit 125. That's the Morley Jefferson Road exit, and then head west. And then at some point, you see the signs for Stearns Resort. Turn right. I think that's like 240th, and it'll take you right back there.
Right on.
Yeah,
Jen's-
Stearns Resort, 4398 New Costa Ave.
Okay.
43.
Jen's reminding people about the classic Kyle cultivation event that's going on for a few years now too. And just like this last weekend, this next weekend coming up's got a bunch of stuff for people to do. So
It does. I'll be in Traverse City. I will miss all of those things.
Yeah, there's the Bluegrass Festival. What else? There's a tattoo convention this weekend. There's a whole bunch of stuff, I think.
is that Bluegrass Festival in Remus? That one that's in
No, that's Wheatland. That's the one
Wheatland,
on September 10th. I'm actually going to go to that one. I'm going with my mom and family and stuff. We go to that a lot. That's a fun one.
As Jamie and I crisscross the state doing different various cannabis things, every time we pass a wheatland sign, I have to listen to the same story about Jamie and the wheatland. So,
you've been to Wheatland?
My mother-in-law lives right by there. I've never made it there. That's the thing. I go by there all the time, but I've never actually been to the event.
It's a fun event. I mean, it's fun.
It sounds
it's a lot different than techno. It's not a techno, but
similar to Hoxieville, though, right? I mean, that type of a music theme, right?
That's what's going on. Hoxieville's this weekend. That's the one.
Hoxieville was last weekend.
Hoxieville was last.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I don't. Maybe I'm fucking.
They had a cannabis tent there for the first time, run by Tom and Christabella from Real Leaf Solutions, and it went really well. So it's a merging of more of a commercial event with cannabis use.
Red Setter Farm says this weekend has H-Ream and Sesh for a Cause as well. I'm curious what H-Ream is.
Yeah, what is H-Ream?
I believe H-Ream is between Kalamazoo and Battle Creek somewhere down, I forget. But I know our Kalamazoo team invited Decrim Nature down there for something. So
there's an event at the Hartford Speedway that we talked about a couple weeks ago, or last week or a couple weeks ago on the show too. It's a lot of band members from some really good established bands are doing it's called the Dead Funk. Here, let me look this shit up.
Yeah, you were mentioning that earlier. That sounded very cool too.
Yeah, and we talked about it on the show a little bit. It is called Dead Funk Summit.
You know, and maybe there were this many events before COVID restrictions hit and we lost a whole summer. You know, maybe there were. I don't know, but I'm just excited about how we're rebounding back into the game right now. It's amazing.
So Mark Shananaquat noticed that you said you're going to be in Traverse City and said, "Hey, get a hold of me and hash rules everything around me." That's what that means.
That's a play on the Burner song. Greed rules everything around me, right? So that's amazing.
Which is a play on a Wu-Tang song, Cream, which is cash is everything around me.
There you go.
I know. these themes, though. But isn't it fun, though, Jake, when you know the story and you can follow them back? It's cool.
Yeah, it's like half the damn songs that are popular. Like when you listen to like Biggie Smalls and shit, you're like, that's the same song. He just rapped on it.
Yeah, it exposes my lack of
sample knowledge,
understanding of that culture, or that world,
hip hop sampling,
but all good. It's all good shit, man. So glad that you're doing it and you found it.
Weekend. We'll have to see how schedule goes.
But this thing is Dead Summit we talked about before. I just want to point out again. I think it's really cool. There's a lot of like members of good bands that are coming together to do this, like from String Cheese, from Particle, from Mo. Big Sam's Funky Nation, Dumpsta Funk, members of these really, really good bands coming together to put on this music in dedication to the dead and do kind of some funk versions of those tunes is what I'm picking up on. I think that'd be a good time. I think Cloud Cultivation's proven itself over the years. So just lots of good choices. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a fun event when you get out to Clio. And Buddy never charged us. It's always free. He's just
when
amazing.
is that?
This weekend in Clio.
Down the street from that speedway where the High Times Cups have been. Hey, you know what? Let me bring that up. I tried to recite a unique fact about your victories in the cup. And is it that one year you got edible, concentrate, and flower? Or what you got? Like you got some really good distinctions in first places in different categories one year. What are the details on that?
Oh, it wasn't over 1 year, but one year I did win. First place in edibles, first in concentrates, and first in a flower in 1 year.
Right. That's
of
awesome. And I know you've won in other years, but I mean that's a particularly cool.
I've won every flower category, and probably my favorite one was the Sunshine Kush, which I actually won with a breeding project that I did. So that was something that I was proud of. But yeah, winning in all the categories is fun. I've actually won a World Cup in the pre-roll category too, and a CBD edible. Right, so I've tried to at least branch out and do my micro business.
Well, it's hard to find someone with the breadth of experience that you have. It's cool.
I tried to learn everything about the plant. It's actually fun to learn things like distillation and extraction. I bet the cannabis plant has taught me chemistry and everything under the sun. Like it's just such a fun thing to learn about all that stuff with a specific plant. You know, I saw psilocybin distillate the other day. Speaking of weird distillate.
Oh yeah. So I mean, we'll have to get into it, but there's lots of events popping up all over the country where, I mean, not only psilocybin distillate is common, but you're seeing DMT cartridges and
I've seen those.
Psilocybin gummies, psilocybin chocolate, psilocybin whatever you can picture, the whole edible market, it's already there with cannabis. Just think back, Vehicle C Social Club, like way back.
Mark Shanaquit says, "I love mushroom honey. What a great way to take your vegetables."
You can get mushroom honey everywhere.
Entheofest honey everywhere.
Well, Entheofest isn't the place. It's definitely the place to come to shout that to the rooftops, make this happen September 18th. That's at 1:11 p.m. And
looking forward to that, man.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. I'm working on also doing a follow-up event on the steps of the Capitol in Lansing in October. So hopefully a date to be released on that very soon. But obviously we'll have to talk about that when those details are confirmed.
Right.
We'd love to be back.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end. I like it when we just kind of have this conversation, let it flow, and then next thing you know, man,
2 hours gone.
We're getting to the end. So I really appreciate you guys coming on today. Jake, is there anything you want to just make sure you get in before we shut it down?
I mean, I appreciate you guys having me on. I always do. You guys always are really intelligent, have a really fun conversation, have really cool guests. Nice to see you, Mike. Nice to meet you. Hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yeah.
Please.
You guys going to be in Morley, it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, we'll be there. Yeah,
I'm on the speaker stage like 2:30, I think, Saturday.
Okay, come by. I'll give you an owl, one of my big ass joints.
Ooh,
that's a great offer.
That's an incentive, man. You should be motivated to make it.
But
good. They'll give me. That's perfect. I got to say hi while I'm talking. So
and I don't know what the current status is, but I do know in really good faith, Jake, you've had some good conversations with Josie and an organization that I work with too, Great Lakes Expungement Network, and I know you're trying to work out ways to help out there. So I don't know what current status is, but I appreciate that anyway, and we're more news out of that when the time comes.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out how we're doing. Yeah, it's exactly. We appreciate you guys, and we're happy to work with you. And
right on.
We're looking forward to it for real. So like I said, I appreciate everybody. I know we're going to do something with the midnight bars. I know we'll probably donate some part of a bar. I don't know if we're making a special bar for it or what we're going to do. That's really where we're in the talks. Like, what are we exactly doing? So but midnight bars, and like I said, thanks for supporting Midnight Roots, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Stone Owl and the owl, the huge ass owl cigar, man. I can't wait to.
I'm excited
with a couple of those too. So
Yeah,
One of
hope
these
to see you
days.
guys soon. Share some with you. You know, we do them in like big ass owls. We put keef in them, put the hash holes. Pretty soon we'll put like
Come on. Rub it in.
psilocybin.
Hell yeah.
All right. Except it can't be smoked.
I need psilocybin rosin then. Give me some rosin.
Yeah. We're gonna have to figure out a non-heat application. But this
okay.
You eat it. You have some in the beginning of the joint in a little glass tube. You open it up, you eat the mushroom, and then you start smoking the joint.
We could make some really potent distillate that's like absorbent on the mouthpiece.
Nice.
I swear I've smoked mushrooms.
Gotta combine it somehow.
Like cigars have the little wooden tip. You can have like a dissolvable psilocybin tip that by the end of smoking it, it's just like down to this little plastic piece that actually holds the end of the joint.
Nice. That's a great idea.
There you go.
Like a little psilocybin lollipop while you go.
Smokable psilocybin lollipop. You heard it here first, people.
Yes, Rick. While you're on, man, how about wrapping us up before we get go too over with this banter?
You know,
I appreciate it, nonetheless.
When we go over, it's because we're having such a good time.
Yeah.
Look at the smiles on everybody's face right now. It's been a great show. We talked about some very serious issues here, and the fact is, this is a wonderful industry. The events are fun, conversations are fun, podcasting is a good time, but we have a responsibility beyond just having a good time. Make sure that we're conducting ourselves with an awareness of what's happening on a legal and on a legislative basis, and make sure that the bad guys don't win. I think that was the lesson from today's show, is just make sure the bad guys don't win.
Or stave them off for as long as possible.
Yep, with wooden stakes and crosses, because they're vampires is what they are. Right.
I dig it, everybody. Thanks a lot, Rick. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Thank you guys for being on. Really appreciate it. We'll do it again sometime. And have a good time this weekend.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
See you guys.